Akademiks just risked it all by exposing Rock Nation. What's up, family? Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing good today. You already know, this is the spot where we dig deeper than the surface and shine a light on what's really happening behind the scenes in the culture. And today, we've got to talk about Rock Nation. Because if you've been paying attention to the way things have been moving since the whole Tory Lanez versus Megan Thee Stallion trial, you already know that this label has been catching a lot of side eyes. See, Rock Nation is supposed to be one of the most powerful, respected names in hip-hop. They've signed some of the biggest stars, they've got endless influence, and they've built themselves up as a major force in the business. But when you really look closer, there's another reputation that's been following them for years. People don't just see them as a successful label anymore. They see them as the gatekeepers, the ones who decide who rises, who falls, and who gets pushed out of the game entirely. And the Tory Lanez situation is one of the biggest examples people point to when they talk about this. A lot of folks believe Rock Nation had their fingerprints all over, not just Tory Lanez's downfall.
2 days after that, I get a call from Rock Nation that says, yo, we heard you're gonna make a statement about what happened, and it'd be in your best interest if you don't make that statement. I'm like, okay, I don't understand what the issue of me telling my fans, like, yo, look, it's not that serious of a deal. I went to jail for whatever. It's like, I didn't get for that 2 days why that was an issue. 2 days later, the TMZ report come out.
But the way Megan's side of the story dominated the mainstream conversation, and when you step back and look at the bigger picture, it almost feels like every time an artist goes against them, something suspicious ends up happening.
Like I was in the right spot. Like I said, I was manifesting a lot of stuff for myself. Never did I ever think that I was actually going to be managed by the people that I looked up to. It just felt like a big family. They're just so intelligent. Like they've been through everything. They still going through it right now.
Now, if you follow DJ Akademiks, you know he's been one of the loudest voices calling all this out. He's been saying this for years, that Tory was set up, that Rock Nation played a part in it, and that anybody who speaks against their machine better watch their back. And lately, it looks like he might have been proven right, because Rock Nation has been moving on him heavy. After the trial, Akademiks wasn't just reporting the news like everybody else. He was choosing a side. He stood with Tory, called out inconsistencies in Megan's story, and put his platform behind the idea that this case wasn't as clean-cut as it seemed. That made him a target, because Rock Nation doesn't like anybody disrupting their narrative. And before long, they pulled him into the legal mess. He got subpoenaed, dragged into depositions, and pushed into situations that look less like justice and more like intimidation tactics. And the crazy part is, Akademiks flipped the script on them. Instead of keeping everything quiet, he went public. He streamed about it, he showed receipts, and he even exposed details that suggest Rock Nation and his lawyers might be way more involved in Tory's takedown than anybody on the outside realized.
Why do I keep saying Tory should take a stand? They're gonna butcher him with that type of shit. Tory's case is, yo, y'all just can't prove I did it. There is enough reasonable doubt that it could have been the girl. It could have been some other shit that shouldn't make y'all find me guilty because y'all can't prove without a reasonable doubt. So again, when everybody say take the stand to say what? Because now you can't just end the story of y'all wrestling and then shots go off. Who put the gun in the car? Why is the gun beneath? They're gonna ask him certain shit that if you're like, you fumbling, you trying to get your story straight, bro, you're gonna look fucked up. Yo, okay, so you wrestle a gun from her.
First, we need to understand how Rock Nation moves. This isn't just a label, this is a network. They've got their hands in music, sports, media, politics, and even the legal system. And when you have that kind of reach, you can make life real difficult for anyone who steps out of line. Look at Desiree Perez, the CEO of Rock Nation. Her name has been coming up in the stories for years, and not in a good way. Her own daughter once exposed her, saying she tried to get her daughter's boyfriend locked up. The receipts showed Perez had connections with police, with healthcare officials, and even with judges. Basically, she had the kind of reach that regular people could never dream of. And she allegedly used all of that, not for justice, but to control her family's situation. So if that's how she moves in her personal life, what do you think happens when somebody challenges her business empire? That's where people say these same tactics get applied. Whether it's getting artists institutionalized, silenced, or even incarcerated, Rock Nation has the money and the connections to make it happen. And in the case of Tory Lanez, That's exactly what people believe went down. Akademiks has been one of the only mainstream voices who never switched up about this. He kept saying Tory was innocent, or at least that the trial was full of holes. And because of that, Roc Nation started targeting him too. During the trial, he wasn't just speaking casually. He was breaking news, dropping details in real time, and at one point, he even got accused of leaking trial information. Meghan's lawyers and even the judge called him out, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. He even started putting smaller voices on the map, like a blogger named Magro, who was also covering the trial and pushing the idea that Tory had been set up. Akademiks invited her on his stream, interviewed her for his podcast, and gave her platform a boost. That collaboration shined a brighter light on the alternative narrative, which of course, Roc Nation did not want out there. And what happened? Meghan ended up suing Magro for defamation, saying she was basically a paid mouthpiece for Tory. And guess who got dragged into the lawsuit right alongside her? Akademiks. He got subpoenaed by Meghan and Roc Nation's lawyers, supposedly because he thought he might have evidence that Magro was being paid by Tory. But when he showed up to that deposition, he quickly realized the bigger game. This wasn't just about Magro. This was about putting pressure on him, trying to punk him, and fishing for information about Roc Nation's rivals in the industry. They were asking him questions about people like Nicki Minaj and Drake, who have their own complicated histories with Roc Nation. That's when things really started to look shady. And then, in one of the wildest moments, Meghan's lawyers accidentally shared their screen during the deposition. What popped up were private chats between the lawyers, where you could see them reporting back to none other than Desiree Perez herself. Think about that for a second. Roc Nation has always denied being directly involved in these legal battles. They try to make it seem like this is just about Meghan versus Tory, or Meghan versus a blogger. But the receipts showed the CEO of Roc Nation being updated in real time during depositions. That's not normal. That's not just business as usual. That's power being flexed. And Akademiks put it all out there. He showed screenshots, called out the lawyers, and told his audience that Roc Nation was playing puppet master. In his words, this wasn't about justice, it was about control. They were using lawsuits, courtrooms, and legal intimidation as weapons to silence voices and protect their image. Now, let's be real. Akademiks is not perfect. A lot of people in the culture don't rock with him, and for good reasons. He's had messy moments, he said reckless things, and sometimes he looks more like an instigator than a journalist. But when it comes to this situation, you have to admit he's been consistent. He said from the jump that Tory was being set up. He said Roc Nation was pulling strings. And now, the way these depositions have played out, it looks like he wasn't just talking crazy. There might actually be truth to it. Now here's where the story takes a wild turn. After Tory's initial appearances in court, the world expected the trial to unfold like any other high-profile case. Lawyers argue, evidence come out, and eventually a jury decides. But in Tory's situation, the narrative didn't just play out in the courtroom. It played out in real time on Instagram Live, on Twitter threads, and through blogs that turned legal jargon into viral soundbites. Every motion filed, every hearing date, every photo of him walking into court became content. And Tory wasn't just the subject of that content, he was actively feeding into it. One of the boldest moves he made was trying to shape the public opinion before the trial even started. Instead of laying low, he went on social media to suggest that the truth wasn't what Meghan and her team were telling people. He dropped cryptic posts and even released music that alluded to the case, something most lawyers would have advised against. Normally, defendants stay quiet, but Tory decided he was going to fight not only in court, but in the culture war of public opinion. And honestly, that gamble partly worked for him. For months, there was this split in the community. On one side, you had people who stood firm with Meghan, saying a black woman should never have to beg for people to believe her when she's been harmed. On the other side, you had people who questioned everything about her story, leaning on inconsistencies and Tory's confident denials as proof he was being set up. It became less about what happened that night and more about the bigger conversation of who gets to control the truth in hip-hop. But then came the deposition. And if you've never seen a deposition play out, let me break it down. It's basically a formal questioning session where lawyers grill the other side under oath. No cameras, just transcripts. But the impact of what's said can be enormous once it hits the courtroom. Tory's deposition became a focal point because it exposed the strategy his team was going to use. They wanted to poke holes in Meghan's credibility, frame the shooting as a misunderstanding, and hint at the other possible shooters. And once word of that strategy leaked to the public, it reignited the firestorm online. At that point, the blogs had a field day. Screenshots of transcripts circulated, half-truths mixed with speculation, and YouTubers broke down every new detail as if they were delivering the nightly news. Tory's case wasn't just a legal matter anymore. It was a full-blown media saga, with influencers and commentators serving as unofficial jurors. And here's where we have to pause, because this whole thing highlights how different the justice system looks when it collides with modern culture. In the old days, a celebrity trial would be covered by a few newspapers and maybe a TV station. Today, it's the blogs, the live streamers, the reaction channels. They decide which clips go viral, whose side gets sympathy, and which soundbite becomes the headline. For Tory, that environment created both opportunities and dangers. On the one hand, he had a loyal fan base ready to spread his narrative. On the other, every mistake he made, every inconsistent statement, was magnified and replayed endlessly. Now let's talk about Akademiks, because you can't discuss Tory's deposition drama without bringing him up. Akademiks positioned himself as the unofficial town crier for the entire situation. Anytime there was an update, he was the one breaking it down to his millions of followers, sometimes even before mainstream outlets got the scoop. But that role came with its own controversy. Many accused him of being biased toward Tory, of pushing narratives that painted Meghan as untrustworthy. Whether that was intentional or not, the effect was powerful. For a lot of young fans, Akademiks became their main source of information on the case. And this is where accessibility for us as a community really matters. Because when your main source of updates is someone who mixes facts with opinion, you risk misunderstanding what's really happening. Tory's team understood that. They knew if they could win the blogs, they could at least muddy the waters enough to make people question Meghan's story. And in high-profile cases, that doubt can be just as powerful as a solid defense. Still, the prosecution wasn't playing around. They brought forward evidence, testimony, and context that painted a clear picture of Tory's role. And even as the defense tried to spin alternative theories, the weight of the case kept pressing down on him. Behind the viral moments, there was still a very real trial unfolding, and Tory was the one facing the consequences. Here's the thing that often gets lost in the spectacle. At the heart of this case was Megan Thee Stallion, a black woman who had to relive her trauma in front of the world while being doubted and attacked from every angle. Her pain became a meme, her testimony dissected like entertainment. That's something we, as a community, need to sit with. Because if someone at her level of fame can struggle to be believed, imagine what happens to women with no platform at all. And yet, Tory's story also resonated with parts of the community that have seen how the system can be stacked against black men. Some people weren't just defending him because they were fans, but because they saw his fight as symbolic of larger issues. False accusations, biased courts, and careers ruined by one accusation. That tension between protecting black women and protecting black men is exactly why this case hit so deeply. It wasn't just Tory versus Meghan. It was us, as a culture, wrestling with how to hold each other accountable, while also pushing back against a system that hasn't always been fair to us. As the trial moved forward, the stakes only got higher. Every court date became a trending topic. Every new leak turned into 1,000 YouTube videos. The deposition especially kept resurfacing, with both sides trying to spin its meaning. Tory supporters argue it showed weakness in the prosecution's case. Meghan supporters said it was just proof that Tory's defense was built on smoke and mirrors. And through it all, the blogs made sure the public stayed invested, because clicks meant money. By the time the jury got involved, the world was exhausted but still glued to every update. And when the verdict finally came, the reactions split the internet in half. For Meghan's side, it was validation that her voice mattered and that justice could be served. For Tory's side, it was confirmation of their fears about a system that takes down black men too easily. And for everyone else, it was the end of one of the most dramatic culture wars hip-hop had ever seen. Now here's where we bring it all home. The Tory Lanez deposition drama wasn't just about one man's fate. It was about how truth gets shaped in the age of blogs and live streams. It was about how our community struggles to balance loyalty to our artists with accountability to our sisters. And it was about how the justice system collides with hip-hop in ways that turn real trauma into spectacle. So, let's leave it with this. When the next big trial hits the culture, and it will, we need to ask ourselves who we're believing, where we're getting our information, and whether we're giving people the grace to tell their stories without turning their pain into content. Because at the end of the day, these aren't just headlines, these are people's lives. And that's the story of how Tory Lanez deposition didn't just shake a courtroom, it shook the culture. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about everything that went down with Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion? Do you believe the legal system treated them fairly? Or do you think there's more to the story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's get a real conversation going. I read every comment, so don't hold back. Let's hear what the community really thinks. For those that want to support our movement, click the link in the description below to grab our new hats. Make America Not Racist for the first time. We only have limited supply available, so grab yours before it's too late.